Hello, hello, hello. Happy,
Hello.
I don't know what day this is. Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Yes.
Yes, yes. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is Cost Me Everything with Yolanda Samuels, and I have a special guest here, Jacquita James.
Hey, everybody.
Thank
Hey,
you so
Lana.
much. Thank you so much for coming on. And can you start off by telling us a little something about yourself?
Yes. Of course, my name is Jacquita Renee James, and I'm a mom of a 14-year-old Air Force veteran, um, educator, uh, wear many hats, work at airport right now. Yes, but what else? God's child, a believer. I know God is my father. He keeps me. He uses me. And so I'm just happy to be able to be you. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. So I want to kind of start off. Can you kind of just start off telling us as far as how you grew up and what led you into the military and then kind of on from there?
Oh yes. Well, I grew up in a country town, small town, Waycross, Georgia, um, where everybody knows everybody. But I I started off. I said I would never go into the military. I had my life planned out to a T. I mean, perfectly, the blueprint, everything. And I was supposed to have a band scholarship, and I wanted to go to Atlanta, but that didn't happen. So um, I started attending college in Waycross, and I worked full time at a One Price Clothing, and then I went to a trailer plant, mobile home plant, where they build mobile homes, and I was going to college full time. Um, I tried to keep my grades up so I can continue to keep my scholarship, but I felt led to go into the military. I was just like, no, God, I know this is not you. I said I would never go into the military, right? But so I kept feeling led, and a young lady who I grew up with, she was a year younger than me. She had already entered into the military. Well, she was home. I went to see her mom, but she was home that particular day, and I had been praying and praying about what I kept feeling to do. And when I went to see her mom, it just hit me to go see her mom. I didn't know she was home. She was in the Air Force, and we talked about it. So it was confirmation. And so I went to the recruiter's office, and I almost enlisted in the Army because they saw me coming. I was going to see the Air Force recruiter, but the Army recruiters saw me and they picked me up because I was a buck 18 at that time. And they picked me up and brought me into their office. And they said all kind of good things. However, like in my stomach, in my gut, my spirit, um, I felt it wasn't right, and that's not where I was supposed to go. And all of a sudden, I left because instead of talking about everything they could offer, they kind of knocked other um, branches of the service. But when I went to talk to the Air Force recruiter, he told me exactly what they could offer. He didn't go veering off what anybody else weren't doing or couldn't do. He just stayed focused on what the Air Force could offer. And I knew that was my confirmation. And so right then on the spot, um, I had to sign up for the ASVAB, and I passed it. I didn't try to. I said, if I get in, I get in. If I don't, I don't. Well, I kind of scored high, not trying. And I joined the Air Force. Yeah.
Wow. Isn't that crazy how when you don't plan on doing something, you
Oh
end
my
up
God.
doing it?
And when you have your life, not what God said, when you have your life planned out, and then it just seems like he comes and wipes it all away. Yes.
Yes. Well, how long did you do in the Air Force?
I stayed in 4 years,
Mhm.
7 months, and 11 days.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. So,
That's it.
what happened in your life from there?
Okay, so I got out. I still had a game plan. I remember praying about where to go from there. Well, I always felt led to go to Tampa. Tampa was the place I was supposed to go. And so while I was still stationed in the military in Eglin, I would drive home. I enrolled in USF Tampa, and had gotten accepted. So the game plan was to drive from Fort Walton Beach every other weekend until I got everything set up. So I had all the arrangements completed. The only last thing for me to do was to get housing, and I was going to use Montgomery GI Bill to pay for that. Because, like I said, I had already been accepted into USF, so that was the last thing to do. However, I ended up moving to St. Pete with family and going to St. Pete College first. And, I took the more scenic route. I thought I was going to get back into Tampa, going to St. Pete Junior College and take all the core classes, which I had classes already from Waycross College and then Okaloosa County College. So I had so many credit hours that, but once you transfer from school to school, you lose credit hours and then you have to accrue more of their course. So it was kind of frustrating. But if I would have stayed the course, that was a word right there. If I would have stayed the course like I had originally told me to do, I wouldn't have gone around the world. However, grown around the mountain several times to get to where I ended up graduating from USF, but USF St. Pete many years later. Yeah.
Wow. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Oh my gosh. So you ended up, what career did you get into?
Well, okay, so I had the career goal of being a physical therapist, and I ended up doing what I said I would never do. I don't want to teach. I love kids, but I will never be a teacher. I will never work in the school system. I will never. Never became forever.
Mm.
Never became purpose, honestly. And God knows exactly what He's doing. The very thing that we don't think we would do or say we would never, or that is not my path. My path is over here. This is where it is. This is what, yes, yes, He took me a different route. So I was in education. I started out as a teacher, well, ESE associate at first, and I worked with children with varying disabilities, but I like to call it um, different abilities because they can do a lot of amazing things. And I just don't ever let them settle. I cannot stand that word disability because it's not a it's different. And they understand, they can comprehend. When you set the goal or the bar a certain level, guess what? They rise up every trip, every time. So yeah.
Oh wow. How long has it been now?
Ooh. Um, well, I started out, oh, well, no, I started out subbing because I was going to school. So subbing first, instructional substitute teaching, and then I went in as an ESD associate too because of the military background. So that's put you a step higher. But then they rearrange, no, it's rearranged their acronyms and yeah. So I went back into subbing. So it was like off and on subbing, um, ESC associate subbing, ESC associate subbing. Because every time I would go to school, I would sub. And then I would come back in, like if a principal liked how I dealt with the kids, because most times it was autism or regular, typical, traditional ed, but the kids with the different abilities, emotional behavior. That's when I got, no, the original was Tyrone. So that was autism. And so it's been what, over 20 years?
Wow. That is
Because
amazing.
I was going through my mind, but I didn't want to veer off too much. But yes,
No,
over
you
20.
good. You wherever you want to go, we can go.
Yeah.
I want to ask you this: how has it? What have you learned about working with children with who are different? What have you learned about them, and what advice can you
Mm,
give to the parents about how to, you know, how to navigate with them?
First of all, even though they may have diagnoses, treat them like children. Do not handicap them. I hate, you know, treat them like you would do any other child. Teach them, teach them basics, even if they're nonverbal. Because let me tell you, when I deal with the nonverbal, even when other people may have said, well, they cannot speak. Well, if they make sound, honestly, I feel that they can talk. So I talk to them. I don't, oh, baby, oh, no, this is what it is. This is how we're going to behave. I'm very loving, but when I have to be firm, I'm firm. And guess what? Again, they know, even the ones who are very aggressive, I'm mommy first. I always tell my mom first. I love you all, but this is how it's going to be because I expect you all to rise up. I expect you all to hit that mark. You're going to learn, and like even when they some children become stubborn because a lot of times I've seen parents who feel guilty. Don't feel guilty. Try not to feel guilty. Give yourself grace. Give your kids grace, but give yourself grace and just do the best that you can do. I would highly just don't feel guilty and let them just be, or they have a disability, so they can't. Yes, they can. They can. Trust and believe they can. And I've had kids that were known nonverbal who talk, even that have worked with therapists. And therapists have said, well, I've been working with them for 2 years and they've never talked to me. Well, if they want something bad enough, like my Wawa ice, they would, they would ask for it. So I push them beyond, not to the point of frustrating them that they want to quit but if you want something from me, you better speak. You better try to communicate. I don't understand. Or, we're going to communicate. And I kid you not, pretty much all of them do, even like they, even the aggressive ones. Don't hit me. I'm a mama first. Guess what they'll think about it? Okay. Yes. You understand. Or those who have not taught, maybe they were thought to have low IQ. But if they can understand their name being called, if they can come to me, they understand, you understand what I'm saying. You're going to do your work. You're going to stop having a tantrum because you're used to not doing because there's low expectation. No, I have high expectations. So you're going to do your work. You're going to try. And this is how it has always been with me. Yeah.
Now that low expectation of preach right there.
Okay. Come on.
You got to touch that again.
Yes.
So what do you can you kind of expound on what you mean by low expectations?
Well, children that have different abilities sometimes from parents and other people who work with them, when children are used to just being left alone, and children are children. Again, I keep reiterating that children are children. So teach them, even if the doctor say they will never learn, don't accept that. I don't care if that is what it is. If medically is shown, is proven, is still talk to your children. Still, I mean, really communicate with them. Um, don't let them just be, because sometimes children are just closed up in a room, or if they having a fit, to keep from dealing with them, they will be closed in a room and, not taught. That's not how we're not going to throw things. We're not, especially if they can't communicate, they do get frustrated and they do want to get your attention, whatever way they know how to, or they're allowed to. So communication is key. Talking to them, teaching them the basics. Uh, seriously, teach children the basics: manners, respect. Well, they don't know how to speak. Manners, respect. Teach them to respect you. Don't feel so guilty that you let them treat you any kind of way, because I've seen that too. It's not okay for children to hit on adults or other children or their siblings. Well, they have a different. No, they have a disability. No, no, no. Teach them, because they are well capable of learning. And I don't know. I know this may sound kind of harsh, but if we can teach animals, and I'm not comparing animals to children, you know. But if we can teach animals, come on, don't put children on a low bar, you know. And that's why I say, you know, and I love hearing other people who have grown with different abilities, especially on the autism spectrum, that tell parents that maybe they couldn't speak for a long time, but their parents didn't give up. And every child is different. Don't get me wrong. Please don't get me wrong. But still treat them as if they understand everything that you're saying. I kid you not. The earlier you start, the with me will keep you like, okay, just sit here. Oh, just sit here. Well, let them tear. They can't understand. They don't know what they're doing. Yes, they do. Trust and believe they do. They do.
Wow, that's amazing. So, how would you say your faith played a role in what you do? Because let me tell you something right here.
Oh my
When
God.
it comes to working with children, if you ain't saved, you will get saved.
Yes,
See what I'm
Lord.
saying? I'm telling
Yes,
you.
Lord. And if you're straddling the fence in your work with children, you're gonna come to Jesus. Okay?
You gonna get
Yes,
right.
I'm telling you.
So please tell me how your faith has made a difference.
Well, let me tell you. Okay, so I know in schools, you know, we're not supposed to pray. I know I keep doing the finger. We're not supposed to pray. Do you know that children ask me to pray for them? Do you know that children have asked me to pray for their family? Yes, I come when I well, right this year I took time off, but I do. I was the on site, but I do still sub every now and again because I miss my baby. So, but what I would do, I would come to classroom as soon as I get on campus. Before I get on campus, I would ask God, show me what to do, how are going to use me, who's supposed to touch me today, you know, how are we going to do this? You have your way. Prayer in the classroom, singing. How do you stay so happy? Well, I'm not happy all the time, but God get the glory. I'm here to tell you. Well, you're always smiling. God gets he gets the glory because trust me, it is all him. Um, I would always pray over the classroom. I like playing music, and I don't just play gospel in the class. Usually, I play relaxing music. You know, before the kids come, I usually play gospel, relax, whatever, and I just always ask God to be there. You know, His presence. If the music don't sit right, I don't care how calm it is. If anything that didn't sit right, and I always, you know, I wouldn't play it. But always praying over the classroom, over people you work with, you know, asking God to make sure my heart is right. Cause you know, we have to die daily to our flesh. Yes. We need God to lead us and guide us in everything. So, but kids, seriously, yes, sometimes when I feel led, you know, I could be teaching or trying to teach, and then I'm just like, I would feel, I'm just like, I feel the heat. And I'll say, okay, God, what is this? And I kid you not, there have been times, okay, like one year, a math coach came in and was teaching, she was teaching math to the class. And all of a sudden, I kept feeling hot, but it felt like it was coming from the inside out, and it was not. And I'm just going to say, if I can say it was not, menopause. It was it's Holy Spirit. So I kept saying, I told her, I said, please excuse me. She said, no, honey, go take care of what you need to take care of. So when I went out the second time, I said, okay, God, what are you doing? What are you gonna do? Like you not came back up in there. And after she finished, the lady, she always hugged me. She said, I'm so happy that you're here. She told me that all the time. So happy that you're here. You know, I said, thank you for doing all that you do. When she left out of there, I tried to start teaching. I kid you not. It was just like my hands. I was just like, whew. I said, okay. I said, you all, I'm trying to move on. I said, but I can't all of a sudden start walking up and down the aisle between the kids. And I said, I feel led to do this. So um, I just started, well, excuse me. All of a sudden, words came out, and I knew it was nobody but the Holy Spirit. And I started talking to kids about things that I had no clue of. Some I knew, but I mean, like during that particular time, there were two young ladies who God said that um, you feel like you're nothing, fifth grade. You feel like you're nothing. Um, and you want it all to end. But God has a plan for you, blah, blah, blah. I mean, when I tell you, I can't remember the details of, but it was so powerful, meaning God was powerful, but the whole atmosphere had shifted. And I knew it was nobody but him. And the one girl, because I had my eyes closed and I just walked up and down the aisles, and one young lady began to weep, but it wasn't even loud. And when I felt led to, like, put my hand on their, shoulder, you know, they all had that, put the heads down. And, I prayed over their families because I just felt led to. Now, if I don't feel led to do stuff, I prayed before, but when I say I felt led to, so I was willing to get in, if it came to that, I was like, Lord, you have me because you are leading me to do this. This is not something I'm doing on my own. So even to the point where I have eyes closed, and what came out was somebody was told they were nothing. Um, they were hit, but I'm paraphrasing now. Basically, they were hit, they were beaten, told they were nothing, they'll never be anybody. And I didn't see the boy, but one little boy said, "How do you know what's going? No, excuse me. How does she know what's going on in my house?" And but God said that you are more than what you're spoken. Don't believe, be respectful. But when people come at you saying who you're not, know who you are. So then he had me to speak life into them, and they had to repeat after me. Not had to, but they repeat. Every single child repeated after me, and just like he had me to do with Johan in the womb, when because I wasn't, and I can go there. I was supposed to have my child. I was
You
never
go
supposed
ahead.
to.
This
Yes,
is your time. I'm gonna mute and
yes.
you talk.
Yes, but just like God used to have me, and still do to this day, to speak over my own child, even in the womb, He have me to speak over children. Even now, when I'm working, when they come through on my job now, I'm like, oh Lord, we have scholars in the house, and I'm like, they're blessed, they're world changer, history makers. God has hand on your straight A students. You blah blah blah. And I kid you not, one day, even there, um, I said, "Do we have?" I saw the scholars. I said, "I'm going to speak over pre-K through high school." Then I heard, "Nope, go even college students." Do you know there were kids, grown-up kids, who were crying right there in the airport because the line was so long? But God had me to speak over their lives, so I don't take credit for it. I'm just really grateful, and that's why. Even in my humanity, Lord, thank you for using me. Thank you. And he does get the glory. And will always say, thank you. God bless you. We know this is God. One girl had no clue where she was going, meaning she was going back to school, but I guess she didn't know what was next, or, but God spoke a word. There was a positive, encouraging word that was spoken to her, and she said, "Can I hug you?" And she just hugged her. She was like, "Thank you, thank you, thank you so much." She said, "You just don't know how that made me. You just don't know clarity. You just don't know." Wow.
Wow, that
So
is amazing. That is amazing. I thank God for that. So you
yeah,
touched on your son a little bit. Can you
yeah,
talk about that? You said you weren't supposed to have him. Can you share a little bit about that?
yeah, yes, yes. Um. Well, okay. So I'm gonna be transparent, and it's okay to be transparent. Um. When God showed me my child, I saw a family. I just knew it was gonna be a family, a whole family, married, and the white picket fence. I'm just saying, just clear. But no, seriously. So I had my child out of wedlock, and but before I had him, okay, let's go rewind. Um, I was not supposed to have children according to VA doctors because of medical. Like medically, my body could not hold children. My womb was turned back retroverted. I had tumors everywhere inside my womb. And so when I did get pregnant, I didn't officially know. Honestly, I said I would do something I said I would never do. And this is before I found out that I was pregnant. I was like, Lord, this can't be. This is not the right time. And I did say that I would, what is it? Not have a child. Because, you can't bring a child into anything like this. But no, God said differently. So I remember I kept having a dream of a little boy. And I said, I'm going to tell you exactly what I said. I said, this can't be God. I said, this is the devil. I'll be honest. But I kept seeing the same little boy, vivid picture of the little boy. So what happened? The last dream I had, it's like I knew. And one of my sister friends who I was stationed with um, went TDY to Jacksonville. And I told her, she was 5 months pregnant. I said, I'm pregnant. And she laughed. She was on the phone with her husband. And she said, Jacquita James said she's pregnant. She said, but she's flat as an iron board. Well, kind of find out I was 2.5 months pregnant and didn't like, everything was still happening. So anyway, when I had gotten back, I made an appointment because I had to teach summer school that year. I always used to run up the stairs. Go, exercising. Well, I could not run up the stairs that summer. I was like, whew, I'm tired. I said, this is not right. So I would try again. And I kept feeling like, yes, it was very painful. And so I made an appointment. And that's when the doctor told me I was 2.5 months pregnant. So I said, okay, God, what are we going to do? And I said, okay, what shall I name him? What should I name him? I did rely on God. And the name Johann Alexander came up. And I said, okay. And that's what I stuck with. And then when I looked up the name, Johann, great, wait, no. How long? God is gracious. And Alexander, great helper of man. So I was like, wow, that was a powerful name. So I was supposed to be on bed rest with Johann. Um, the VA could not see me. They couldn't treat me anymore. So I had to go to Bayfront Medical Center. And I had one of the most amazing doctors ever. And she said, because of who I believed in and how positive I was, she said she would only tell me one time, medically, there's no way I should be pregnant or carrying a baby. She said, you're not built to carry babies. I said, okay. She said, but I'm going to stand, I'm going to believe God with you. And she said, you will never hear me say that again. She said, so because of how positive you are, and who you believe in, I'm going to stand with you. She said, but you're going to have to be on bed rest the whole time. I was like, she said, because you're high risk pregnancy. I said, shoot, there's no way I can do that because I have to work. I said, nobody's going to take care of me. So she said, Jacquita, she said, I'm telling you, if you want to even think about having this baby, you need to stay positive. Well, she heard a conversation. She said, you have to stay positive. You can't talk to anyone that's negative. She said, you can't have any stress. She said, you're going to have to be on bed rest the whole time. And I said, there's no way I can do that, the bed rest part. So I kept pleading with her. And she told me that she's putting her license on the line. And thank God the school that I worked at that time, they would allow me to lay down. They would allow me to go to sleep. They would, they just gave me grace. So I didn't take it for granted because, during that time, the board was trying to eliminate jobs. So I was like, my job is not going to be eliminated. So I was still running. I didn't let the doctor know. And we had changed from what is it, behavior kids, EBD, pre-K to ASD. So, well, EBD, emotional behavior, and we lost that unit and we gained the autism unit for pre-K. So, I worked in there and got to sleep and everything, but I would still have to run behind the kids, and the teacher I worked with was amazing. The other associate in there was amazing. She became like a sister to me. We always called each other sisters from another mister. She was my 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 peach colored sister. She took care of me. And so needless to say, I had people watching and helping and um, while I was going through that process. Now, I was in pain all the time and I almost lost Johan twice. And the doctor told me that anytime I was in pain, comes to the hospital. And I said I would refuse to because I knew she was going to put me on bed rest. But I did almost lose him at 3 months. Well, soon after I found out, I ended up having to go to the hospital, and the pain was so excruciating. I did ask them to give me meds, and they said the only thing they could do was give me Tylenol or just let me um, just lay there. And the nurse just coddled my hand and just rubbed me. She said, because the only other solution was narcotic. And I said no. And because I worked with kids who had been, yes, I said I'll just deal with the pain. But it was excruciating. So I sat there, and they, of course, they told me during the high risk that I could lose my life too. And they said that's with anybody giving birth, or with child, or pregnant. But with me being high risk, I was on the high end of losing my life too, as well as the baby. So I called everybody and I told them that I was in the hospital just in case. Um, I told my mom, and she asked me, did I want her to come? I told her no, I'll be okay. So needless to say, later on the next day, they released me. Johan was okay. Um, 3 months later, at 5 months, he decided to beat drums on the tumors and use them as drums. So he was in there having a party. He is a drummer. He was beating on them. He was lying on them. When they took the picture, no, one time, because they always had to monitor me. So they're always, they try not to do sonograms, but they had to do one every time I went. And I started going every day. That's how painful it was. But, and I will expound on this. Instead of me crying because I was in pain, I turned it into worship. I couldn't sleep at night. And instead of me like, oh my God, I'm in so much pain, I just worshiped God. So the crying turned into praise because I didn't want to be sad. Even though I was in pain, I was just like, Lord, I thank you. I praise you. And I would play the piano to him. And then I would always fall asleep. It was hard to fall asleep. But again, I wouldn't tell the doctor I was in pain. I'm good. I'm good. And I would be telling the story because I was like, I cannot afford to be on bed rest. So, what time? 5 months. I remember feeling very ill. So I went to my aunt's house and I stayed the night. Well, Johan, I couldn't hardly move. It was just very hard and very painful. So I knew, I went to work though, actually. I did go to work, and everyone kept telling me, they watched me closely. They said, you don't look well. I said, I'll be fine. Because again, I knew if I went to the hospital, I felt they were going to put me on bed rest. So one lady, she was a reading coach. She said, let me tell you something. If you don't go to this hospital, I'm going to go with you. I said, that's okay. She said, if you don't go, I'm going to take you myself and I'm going to stay with you. I said, that's okay. That's okay. I'll go. So I left school. They made me go and I went. Well, I was in so much pain. That was the second time my body was trying to eject him. Excuse me. Excuse me. He was lying on the tumors then. And I didn't know that at the time. I just know the pain was so excruciating. I was shaking. That's how bad it was. And when they did the sonogram, excuse me, they the lady asked me, did I like music? I didn't tell her I played. I didn't tell her I played at church because I was going to Without Walls at the time. Um, I didn't tell her I stayed up at night. I was just trying to be as basic as possible because I didn't want to give them any hint that I was in pain. But they saw it and they monitored it that day. But she kept asking me about music. Do you like music, sweetheart? You know, because it will relax you. It will do this. It will do that. And I was like, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I just kept saying, yes, ma'am. And then finally I said, yes, ma'am. I love music. As soon as I said that, I kid you not. I kid you not. Johan sat up and he looked like he started playing the piano. And this was a more seasoned lady giving a sonogram, so she knew she had been there. It was not. I saw it, but I was just like, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want them sending me to the fifth floor, having me locked down. You know? So I saw it when she started yelling. Oh my God, why does this baby look like he's playing the piano? Oh my God, look at this. Look at this baby. He looks like he's playing the piano. And sure enough, he did. And she took the picture and she gave me that picture. She wasn't supposed to, but she gave me the picture. And later on, we found out he was he was also laying on the tumors, like with his hand behind his head, and he had his legs crossed. Yeah, like he was on Laguna Beach, chilling in the sun, just getting suntan. I don't know what he was, why he thought that
Oh
was
my
cool.
gosh.
I don't know why he thought that was cool. So after I learned that, I was in school and working two jobs at the time. The doctor didn't know that because I was trying to hurry up and graduate. Um, and I would have had a semester to go, a couple more classes, but then they pushed. Yes, yes, they dropped some classes. It was a mess. But anyway, so that night I did go to class. They kept me in the hospital all that day, but that night I did go to class, and we had to do a Chicken Little play. Well, when I started hurting really badly, I realized he was on the tumor, so I started moving him with my fingers. I said, "Get off of those." And what he started doing, he started pushing back. So they got to see him stretching my shirt, like doing this all up in there. And they were like, whoa, whoa, look at that. So yeah, so he always put on a show. He did. And to make a long story short, 5 months I almost lost it. So I had him at 8 months. He came early. He was a preemie, but he came full term. And to top that, I went to the restroom thinking I had to go, and I kept pushing and pushing, and I was in there for an hour, and I was just like, why can I not go to the bathroom? Well, the teacher, Miss Crady, said, she knocked on the door. She said, Jacquita, she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm using the restroom. She said, you're not using the restroom. She said, you're trying to have a baby. She said, you're in labor. And I said, no, I have to go. She said, you do not have to go. She said, you're in labor. I said, I have a whole nother month to go. And on top of that, we had a concert that week. We had band practice. No, that was the week before. We had band practice. That was Thursday. We had band practice that Wednesday. I was sitting at the organ eating grapes, frozen grapes and strawberries. And I was in so much pain, which in pain anyway, but I was in so much pain. I was rocking, just sitting there like, And I remember the bass player, he's like a brother. He said, you are in labor. I said, no, I am not. You don't know what you're talking about. Even though they had how many boys? Yes. But I was just like, no, I said, I have a whole month to go. So this child is going to stay up in there. Oh, and at 5 months, I was supposed to have an escort with me everywhere. I was not supposed to be by myself anywhere, not at home, not at school, not when I go to the mall, not anywhere. I was supposed to have somebody with me everywhere I went because it had gotten that serious. And also, they told me every time I went to the hospital, every time I checked in, Miss James, and I kid you not, be prepared. The baby's not going to make it. Your baby's going to die. They said that all the time, every single time I went there, because it did look like it, but God said differently. And I would say sometimes, I said, thank you for you giving me your medical expertise. I mean, your medical, whatever you have to tell me. But God said, I'm going to have this child. And sure enough, that's all I heard. He's going to die. Wrap your mind around it, Miss James. This baby's not going to make it. This baby's not going to make it. And the day that I did have to be rushed to the hospital, that day, Miss Crady told me to come out of the restroom. The doctor called, the one that said that she would never tell me that yes, she called and she sounded frantic. And she said, Jacquita, she said, okay. She said, I have some bad news. I know I said I would never say it again. She said, but it doesn't look good. She said, your baby is turned sideways. He's breached and he was turned sideways and then it was a hot mess. She said, and the tumors are taking all his nutrients and all the blood from him. And she said, a team of OBs are flying in for you as we speak. She said, and we have to have an emergency meeting and then we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do with you. You're going to have to have a cesarean. And I said, is that today? She said, no, they're flying in today. I said, because I'm in so much pain. She said, I told you to come to the hospital. I said, I know. I said, but I just wanted to wait. She said, you can't wait. You can't afford to do this. You can't afford to wait. She said, you are a high risk pregnancy. She said, it's not a regular pregnancy. So she was really frantic. She said, you're going to have to come in. I said, I'm trying to wait. She said, you can't do that. So anyway, I was in labor and we did go. My sister, Kim, she drove me. Kind of find out her husband was in the hospital across town. But the principal, assistant principal, everybody, it was like bells and whistles. They stopped traffic. We rushed out. She drove me to the hospital. They said I was only, was it a half a centimeter at first? And they still said, you're going to have this baby today. I said, no, I know people who've been dilated way more than me and y'all sent them home. So they said, no, baby, this is high risk pregnancy. So they did prep me for surgery. Um, they prepped me for a cesarean. They had me all hooked up and everything. But then two doctors got into it. I mean, like yelling at each other. And one said, well, the baby crowned because I guess he went on ahead and turned around. Oh, and there was a tumor that was blocking 95% of my opening, to be honest with you. So he bypassed that. He crowned. And one said, she can't have the baby. Um, she has to have cesarean. Dangerous. We can lose her and the baby. Then the other doctor said, no, the baby bypasses. I think this is like a miracle, blah, blah, blah. So when I say they were yelling to the top of their lungs, and I'm just like, I felt like and this is my words, I feel like I'm levitating off the table. And then Kim had to stop them and said, you all do something. You see, she's in pain. So, you don't get an epidural after a certain centimeters being dilated certain centimeters. Well, they had to call the top dog out of cardiac surgery and he came down. He said, well, you must be special, little lady, because by that time I was 9 centimeters dilated and they usually definitely don't do that by that time. Well, in order for me to have him, I decided with the one doctor that said have him naturally, of course with epidural without being cut. Um, and so they pulled him out of surgery and they said either way they were going to have to do it because there's no way. The pain was measuring off the charts. So he came down. I told him I am afraid of needles. When he showed me the needle that he had to inject me with, I said, what is that? He did tell me. I said, oh my God. He said, babe, he said, trust me. He said, he said, I believe in God. He said, so we're going to put our faith in him, but I want you to relax. I just want you to trust me and trust that he's going to lead me. He said, because yes, you're not supposed to have this done now. He said, but we have to do it so you can go ahead and deliver this baby. And I said, thank you, sir. He said, you're going to be all right. I was like, praise God. Thank you, Jesus. So he did. And next thing you know, I felt good. So I could feel the contractions and they still measured off the charts. Even the nurse and My aunt was just like, ooh. And Johan came out the 3 push. He did. And the doctors, the team that flew in, they came and they apologized to him. The next day, they came and apologized to him. They said, we can honestly say you are a miracle. And we apologize because we said that you weren't going to make it. And you're strong. He was 5 pounds, 4 ounces. He was little tiny, so no body weight, no meat on him. But so I had to feed him, and they told me to feed him on demand. And I was like, shoot, but I did. So yeah, that's the story of Johan and me delivering and pregnancy. Yeah.
That is amazing. Your faith played a role in
Oh
that's
my God.
my God.
Yeah.
If you didn't have faith,
Yeah.
he wouldn't have made it, and you probably wouldn't have made it. But thank God that your
Amen.
faith did not fail you, and I thank God for
Amen.
that. That is
Yeah.
amazing that your
Yeah.
faith stood that strong. Now,
Yeah.
here's the last thing I'm gonna ask you, if you're willing to share it,
Okay.
your journey that you went through. Because as we look on your picture that you had, you showed that you had some things that you had to go through. Do you mind
Yes.
sharing a little bit about that?
Yes. Cancer. Hmm. And that beast. Anyway, during when I found out I had cancer, well, I had been complaining for 2 years. I stepped out on faith to go back to school. This is when I finished the 4-year degree. I had been working in the school system. And as soon as I stepped out, there was another battle that I was faced with. I mean, I kid you not, it was just like step out on faith, then I had a court battle. And I won't expound on that for certain reasons, but it was brutal. And I questioned God. That made me question God, that particular thing. But and then parents were battling illnesses in Georgia. So what started happening, I started feeling ill. And I will say, while in court, I knew something wasn't right. It wasn't just exhaustion. I felt like my body was shutting down. And I kept saying, God, something's not right. And I would go from school, I had to finish by a certain time. So that was high stress. Of course, the court battle was very stressful. And then I would drive to Georgia to kind of help take care of parents. So I remember telling my dad, I said, something's not right. I said, something just doesn't feel right. And he did ask me, he said, do you think it's cancer? I said, because it feels like my body is shutting down and it feels like it's turning on itself. And that's how I tried to describe to the VA, where they kept saying well, we think is this, we don't think they did a mammogram and then they did a sonogram. We see something, but we don't think it's cancer. So, while going through all this other stuff, I was like, bump it. I don't have time to worry anymore. So, but I kept feeling run down. I kept feeling like my body was literally shutting down. But then, you have this child that you have to make sure is okay too. And he was straight A honor roll student, but battling stuff too, so I'm trying to make sure I'm staying balanced, praying like, God, you see everything that's going on. Why is this happening? I didn't even have time to worry about myself. I'm trying to make sure Johan was okay. So anyway, one day I said, God, if something's really, really wrong, please show me. I need radical stuff. And that's how God deals with me, in a radical way, to let people and let me know this is him. So all of a sudden it felt like I had wires all around my left breast. And it felt like somebody had turned electricity and was shocking me. And the pain was so, I was just like, oh my God, I feel like I'm being shocked. And so I went to the VA, I went to the hospital, and I said, look, I have a little one that I have to take care of who needs me. So can you all please check and see? Something's not right. Something's not right. And I said, I don't even feel right. And I was I won't say a health guru, what is it, guru. I ate pretty well. I ate healthy, but not just greens. Okay. I exercise. I was always active. So, everything was good. Everything always looked good, even my labs and everything. So, that's when they ran more tests. And the doctor called me herself, my primary, and she said, "You didn't call me back." I said, "I'm tired." I said, and I feel like I have so much going on at the same time. I just don't have time. She said, "You have to take care of you in order to take care of the baby." I said, "I know." I said, "I'm trying to." I said, "But nobody's listening to me." So she said, she looked at the scans that I had before, and she said, "They don't see this." So she said, "Well, we'll make them see." And then that's when she ordered an MRI. That's when I guess it showed up. And so I had to have a biopsy. And my mom was supposed to be here, but she ended up getting ill. They were supposed to put me to sleep, but of course I had to drive myself, so I couldn't go to sleep. So, actually 2 months before that, I had my son and I was in a car accident, and my my sternum had gotten fractured. So they had to push the biopsy back 2 more months, 2 months. And so while I was laying there, I had to lay there for 2 hours. But everything that could go wrong went wrong through the biopsy. Like the dye wouldn't go in, it shot out. The blood started shooting out. It just wouldn't. I don't know. And I was like, Lord, am I not supposed to do it? Am I not? I don't know what was going on. So even down to when the radiologist had to do the biopsy, since we found it on the MRI, I had to lie like I was lying in the MRI. So he had to drill from one side of my breast to the other. Um, he had to numb me as he, like numb it, but I felt the pain. And the nurse who had been talking to me, she was a more seasoned nurse. She did cry out. She's told me before the time. She said, "I'll step in for mom." She said, "Since mom can't come, I'll be right there with you. I'll hold your hand." And that's how we communicated with each other, excuse me. And so while she was sitting there, she was holding my hand. I couldn't move. I remember just crying, but I couldn't cry loud because I was afraid to, you know, because they said if I moved, they would have to start over. Well, I felt the heat and I felt the pain from the drill go from one side to the next. And I said it was hot and I feel it. And I was told that, uh, no, you just feel the pressure. And I said, I'm sick of people telling me what I feel. I feel the pain, but I couldn't move. So I just endured and I just kept like crying. So the nurse felt the tears on her hand and she just burst out crying. And I know, one might say, well, she shouldn't have done it. She did. She did. And she felt the pain for me. And she said, she said, "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. Nobody should have to go through this by themselves." And so she kept holding my hand. And, when I finally did get to look, because they had to push me back in there, it was, of course, blood everywhere. And I saw tissue, my body, just, so I was just like, Lord, I said, I did ask God, I said, why do you keep putting me through, why do you keep putting me through harsh things, and then you make me go through it by myself, but he gently remind me he's always with me, and, sometimes, during that time I would cry and just like, I feel like you put me here on this earth to suffer. I have told him that. And, but no, it's when we go through things like that, when we go to have valley excursions, I found that that's when we have to trust him the most. But we're not just going through for us. Sometimes it doesn't seem fair. Sometimes life is not fair, but it's a blueprint for other people to see, even if they're not going through exactly the same thing. Some people do go through the exact same thing, or maybe it's just a little, but it's still a blueprint for somebody else's life. But anyway, while I had that going on, they found out that I did have cancer. So I had been complaining for 2 years. So it was there for 2 years. But by the time they had gotten to it, they said it was small. But then another doctor, when I had surgery, the day I had surgery, sorry, I had two procedures before the major surgery and they couldn't put me out. So Again, let's talk about mapping. I thought it meant that the surgeon was going to draw on the breast where he had to get the cancer. That was two metal rods that looked like they had to be screwed down into my breast while I was awake. And one doctor said that they should have done that second because she couldn't get an accurate test on putting the radioactive stuff in. So I had two long rods driven like screwed like this. And honestly, that time I said, I feel like a prisoner of war because they numbed, but I still felt that too. And I said, Lord, I feel like I'm being treated like I'm not human. That's what I felt like, you know? So that particular nurse, she was younger. She held my hand, but she wouldn't look at me, but tears were flowing from her face. And they just kept dropping because I would look up at her like, do you see this? Oh my gosh. I was like, nobody should have to go. I was like, nobody should have to go through this. It was bad. So by the time I went to the second procedure, that's when the lady said, you're not going to have an accurate reading. However, I still have to put the radioactive substance around your aorta. So she said, but I can't get in a certain place, so it won't see all the cancer. She said, but I have to do it anyway. She said, this will be painful too. She said, but it will only last for a second. So once I inject you, it's going to be very painful, but it'll go away in a second. So I was just like, here I am, kind of trying not to scream out. And I said, wow. I said, I'm getting ready to cancel all this. Bump it. I'll just deal with cancer and whatever happened, whatever my fate is, that's what it's going to be. I said, it's to the point now. I don't even care. Honestly, I said, I don't care if it takes over and I just go. I said, maybe that would be best. And they was like, no, 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 don't say that. You know, your baby needs you. But I was just like, all this pain. And I just feel like I'm tortured. So I felt like a war is me moment, having a war is me moment, you know? And I said, I feel like God just left me hanging with this other situation too, honestly. So, but that wasn't the case. After that, she finished. I was exhausted. I was exhausted before I came to her, and she said, "I'm so sorry that you have to go through this." And anyway, they rolled me in to. They came and got me, and they rolled me into down the hall, and that's where everybody was standing. Like I guess when people donate organs, like the last row, that's what it seemed like. I didn't know that. I thought they were out, they were supporting because they kept asking me every doctor that came in contact. They all stood in the hallway. How did you know you had cancer? They said, how did you know? Because I guess they read a chart or heard that it was said that I didn't have it, but it was there. I said, well, I'm going to be honest. I said, no, we here at the VA, please don't call the people and send me to the fifth floor. I said, the only person I can give credit to is him, and that's God, because I had to ask for signs and, I didn't look it. I started swelling. Don't get me wrong. I started swelling, but I looked just healthier. I put on weight and I was swelling and stuff like that. But if you didn't know me, you'd think, oh, that's just how she looks. But no, I was getting sick. And one lady at the court asked me, am I taking care of myself? I said, yes, ma'am. She kept asking me that each time we had gone. And then she said, the second time, she said, okay. But kind of find out each time I was sick and I was bleeding even there. And I couldn't say, I don't feel well. I just had to act like everything was okay in every situation, and, well, let's go back to the surgery. After they had surgery, the surgery took longer. There was complications. Actually, I died on the table. Actually died on the table. And I didn't know that. That was the first time I slept in years properly without feeling, like I hadn't slept or waking up and down throughout the night or worrying about this, watching, this was the first time I slept. That was the first time I slept. Well, how old was my son? 8. Yeah, 9. Nope, he wasn't 9 yet. He was still 8. So that was the first time I had slept properly in 8 years. Um, so when I woke up after the surgery, because my sister called, it was supposed to only take an hour and 15 minutes, but it was all day. And then they had me in the OR garage, and a nurse was sitting at, I was laying that way, so the left side of my head. And when I woke up, I said, I'm back, not knowing that I had died. I said, I'm back, and I said, oh my God, I feel so good. And her eyes were like bulged out. And she said, mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. I said, no, I feel good. She said, mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. I said, what do you mean? I said, this is the first time I slept. I feel good. I feel so good. She said, baby, I don't think you understand. I said, understand what? She said, you wouldn't wake up. I said, but I'm here now. Still not. Duh, it still didn't register to me. And she said, you would not wake up. She said, you didn't wake up. I said, but I'm here. I'm back. The surgery was obviously good. She said, mm-mm-mm-mm. She said, you wouldn't wake up. She said, do you know where you are? I looked around. I said, I'm still at the hospital. Um, and I looked, I said, oh, I'm still in the OR. She said, you're in the OR garage. So I don't know if they were getting ready to harvest. I don't know what in the world, but they told my sister they would call her back later, but they did have complications. So she said, sweetheart, she said, I don't understand. I don't think you understand. I said, and I was still like trying to figure out what is she, it felt like we were talking in code. She said, you don't understand. I said, mm-hmm. Then I said, oh. She said, mm-hmm. And I said, oh, still didn't know. Then she said, you would not wake up. I said, oh. So she was like, yeah. So I guess I was gone. And then I had to have a second surgery because with it being small cancer, they had to go back in the second time because they didn't get it all. So the second surgery, I asked for the same thing because they intubated me. I asked them to do the same thing, whatever, make sure I was out. That the person who was given the what is it? The whatever puts you out. I can't even think of the word right now. I'm sorry. Um, he said, she wants the same thing. I'm not doing that. I'm not intubated. No, I'm doing an alternative. So he was keep panicked. And I said, okay, so it must have been bad because this daughter panicked. He was like, I'm not doing what happened last time. I'm not intubating her. I'm not doing any of that. He said, I'm just going to do an alternative. And I said, oh, okay. Yes. So he was adamant about it. And so his urgency of saying how quickly he wasn't going to do it and how he looked at, I just studied all of that. I said, wow, it must have been that bad. And it still didn't hit me or dawn on me like that. And even with going through the cancer, after that, they started chemo. The first time they didn't have a port in me, so I had to have it right away because how long everything was prolonged and waited, the wait time. So it burned my veins the first time. I had this chemo called Red Devil, and there was another one mixed with it. That, of course, it all is bad, but it had me so like, ugh. But they said that's kind of the worst chemo to have. And I don't know if it was for breast cancer, the worst kind of chemo to have for breast cancer. They said they called it the Red Devil for a reason. But anyway, so I had that. The second time they had to put before they could do the second chemo because my veins couldn't take it, they had to do surgery and put in a port, which they're not supposed to cut you once you start chemo. Well, after they finished that, my mom came for that. They called made an emergency phone call and said, get me down to the chemo clinic right away. Couldn't find out. I didn't have an immune system. So again, their God is keeping everything together. That's why they're not supposed to cut you. But I did not have an immune system at all. So he kept me. Shortly after that, I did get sick. They had to give me white blood. So that this was it Nuprogen. There's two things I had. One thing I had to shrink tumors before, so I get those. I think it's Nuprogen. Lupron is one of them. But anyway, they had to give me that to boost, create white blood cells. So after I left, my mom left that day. I went to work because I was just like, there's no way I'm staying home by myself. So as the day after they would give the shot, I started noticing, it felt like it was like a pulsation in my body. And it started off low, like, when I was like, what in the world is that? Well, it started feeling like I was getting electrocuted. And I don't know why. I don't know if it mixed with the chemo and then I would have that reaction. But the first time I had it, I remember I was sitting at USF because I worked at grad studies. And all of a sudden, I just started feeling like, "Ugh," and I would try not to. But the young man, he was a veteran too. He told the boss, the big boss, he said, something's not right. She doesn't feel good. She's going to try to stick it out. She doesn't look good and she doesn't feel good. She needs to go home. And the director of grad studies was like, baby, go home. I got you. Go home. I said, no, I can't. I said, I need to stay here and I don't want to go home by myself. So I cried and I was like, I don't want to go home by myself. She said, baby, you're not well. Trust me, I went through this with my friend. You need to go home, baby. Just go rest. So I ended up going home, but I had to cook because, I tried to keep everything the same for Johan, like nothing changed. And on the way home, I stopped to the store. I kid you not, you all, it felt like I was being electrocuted. It was to the point where my body was like just um stiffening, and I would scream out and I wouldn't try to. I was like, girl, hush, hurry up and get home. But it was so painful in that I couldn't move. It was just like I would just cringe like this and in the store. And this young lady who worked there, her mom, come to find out, passed away from breast cancer. She was like, what's wrong? Can I do something for you? I said, no, baby. I just need to pay for my stuff and get to the car. She said, I need to call the ambulance. I said, no, which they told me if anything go wrong, if I had a fever, do not take Tylenol. Come straight to the hospital. She said, you're not normal. She said, you have no, low immune system. Come straight to the hospital because you're a chemo patient. Well, what did I do? I said I had to make sure I cooked for Johan. I had to make sure I took some medicine. I just wanted to go to sleep. Wrong thing to do. I called my friend, sister friend, and asked her. I said, I feel like I'm being electrocuted. She said, get to the hospital. I said, but I have to make sure. She said, get to the hospital. So I said, okay. I said, I'll go. I didn't go at that time. I went later on. I made sure Johan had his food, made sure he did his homework, but I was like screaming out and I was trying not to do it for him. He asked me, are you okay, mom? I didn't want him to see me like that. So later on, when we went to the hospital, I told my uncle, just in case something happens, I'm going to the hospital. I'm just going to let them check me out. And I had a fever. It was 101.9. And then I took something, which I wasn't supposed to do. um, I went to the hospital. I told them I was a chemo patient. But by the time the fever was down, I asked them, could I go home? She says, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to check in. I said, well, I have my baby. Excuse me. I have my baby here. And she said, well, I'll take care of both of you. I said, I just want things to be normal for him. She said, I'm telling you, please. I said, I know I'm supposed to see the chemo, go to the chemo lab the next day. So she said, make sure you tell them that you did. And I tried to check you in. So I told them I didn't know I didn't know it was that serious, you all. Excuse me. um, I was supposed to be admitted. The chemo nurse got upset and was like, who didn't admit you? I said, no, I begged them to um, let me go home. I don't know what's going on. Sorry. Um, hold on for a second. So the next day I was admitted in the hospital for some days. And they told me I was sicker than I knew, or more sick than I could comprehend. And I said I just wanted to go home and take care of my child. And that was the bottom line. But they kept me. They said, well, let me tell you this. If you don't stay in here, and if you don't concentrate on getting better, your child is not going to have you anymore. And the lady, the nurse at the chemo lab told me, she said, let me put this to you plain terms. She said, the stunt that you pull, and she was like a sister. She said, I'm going to be blunt with you. Right now, you're walking dead. She said, you have no immune system. She said, now, do you understand that? I said, wow. I didn't know that. I thought it was just low. but I didn't know I didn't have not any. So another nurse the night before made me promise that I wouldn't go anywhere else. She said, because she looked at the numbers. She said, "Did they tell you what your numbers were?" I said, "No, they just said they were low." She looked, she said, "Baby, you don't have an immune system at all." She said, "That's dangerous. You don't have an immune system at all." She said, "So if somebody sneeze on you, if they look at you hard, you can," she said, "to be honest with you, you can, yeah, it's not good." And so I still said, "I'll just go home." So she made me promise I'll go home. But the next day, that's when the chemo nurse said, "I'm just going to put it to you bluntly. You are walking dead right now." And I understood that. I understood that. But I was admitted to the hospital later that day. We finished that battle, chemo, radiation. Um, that took a while, but you know what? Again, faith, positivity. Um, just had to, even in certain circumstances, had to pretend like I was well. I couldn't let people see me um sick for the sake of, you know, um my child. So I had to just play like I was okay while I was going through chemo. And I remember one day I had to take Johanna across the bridge, and I had just gotten out of chemo, so they gave me an extra dose of cocktail so I can make it. They were heated, they were livid, but I had to play like everything was okay. I just didn't let certain people know that I was ill. And I dropped him off, and I was like, "I'll see you later." And then I went back home and just, yes. So anyway, God is good. Faith, again, we're going to go, it always leads back to faith in God and knowing that God is. And
Wow.
that's all I can
Wow, that is amazing. I tell you, you God has definitely built you tough. Seriously,
say.
the stuff that you had to endure, it's just a blessing that you made it through. And like you said, your faith,
Yeah.
your faith is what made you whole. And I thank God for that. And so, what advice would you have in closing? What advice would you have for those who may find themselves going through tough times? Like you said, at one point, you was like, God, why is all of this happening to me? Sometimes you just feel so overwhelmed. What advice do you have for those who feel like, it's like they feel like they get it from every side? What would you say to them?
I will encourage people, first of all, when you're going through, be careful who you surround yourself with. That is vital, you all, that you can't have negativeness around you when you're going through. I don't care how close they are. I don't care, related, friend, co-worker. I'm telling you, as much as possible, um, I don't say isolate yourself. Get around positive people, people who will encourage you, because we're here to encourage each other. Honestly, nobody has it together. Okay. So when you're going through, make sure you surround yourself with positive people. I don't care if you have faith, don't have faith. There's a higher being. I know God does exist. So for the people that do not believe, prayerfully, you know that, I'm sorry, there's somebody greater. Everybody knows that somebody greater, whether you believe or not. But I say faith, even when faith is tested, because your faith will be tested and tried. I'm here to tell you, when I wanted to throw it all away, thank God his hand was on me, because even when I said I quit, he's like, "No, you don't." His hand was there. So I just pray that you just keep faith, hope. When you have hope, think on positive things. I'm telling you, this has worked. Think on positive things, even when you feel sad. If you feel sad, if you count your blessings, even if it seems like things have been taken away, there's always something, even if it's a little something to be thankful for. Think on that. Try to think on, you have a roof over your head. Um, it may not be where you want to live. You have clothes on your back. It may not be how you want to dress. You have food. It may not be the food that you want. I'm just saying, just try to think on those things that are good, those things that are positive. Sorry. So that's I just encourage everybody to do that.
Amen. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your testimony. So, can you let people know how can they follow you, like on Facebook or Instagram or anything? Can you let them know how to get in contact with you?
Yes, Jacquita James, Jaquita.James at Facebook. I think on Instagram too. I'm not sure because I had somebody hack my page, and you know what? I just want to talk to the hackers. I need y'all to get y'all life and do right by folks. Leave people alone because we all, I ain't saying struggling in a bad way, but we all trying to live life. So hackers, just go get you some business and tend to your business and leave everybody else alone. Okay,
We
that's all I
rebuke
got
you,
to say.
hackers.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, that is so awesome. I just thank you so much again for being so transparent and sharing your journey, sharing, how what all that God has taken you through. And I just really thank God that you're still here. And
amen.
that's a blessing in it that you're still here. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. And I hope you all were blessed by this testimony. And I hope that you would share it with someone who may be going through that same thing, that they'll know that as long as, like she said, positivity, and that scripture talks about that whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are good report, those are the things that we think on. And you
Yes,
are a testament that scripture does work.
yes.
That the more life you think and the more
Oh my God.
you see the good, then the
Yes.
more good will happen and the more you'll
Fun.
be able to make it through.
And you lifted other people. Even the doctors had to say that. They said because of your faith and because of positivity, you helped get us through. You let us know with Johan and with the yes. So
Wow,
yeah,
that
yeah.
is amazing. That is amazing.
So,
So
but
you
thank
all,
you.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for even thinking of me. I appreciate you more than you know. So I hope and pray that people are following you and they are blessed by your ministry.
Amen.
Yes.
All glory to God. I just thank God because he gave me people's names I asked,
Amen.
according to his will. So
Amen.
he
Amen.
wanted you to share what you went through, and it's gonna be a blessing because it blessed me. I'm just looking
Amen.
like, is she the biotic woman? I mean, seriously, the, that's nobody but God. That's all I can say.
Nobody but God. Nobody but God.
My God, my God. If you didn't get to listen in the beginning, please go back because wow, I'm telling you, God is just amazing. So
Yes.
yeah, so we hope you all have a great night. We will see you all next time. Y'all be blessed. We love
Yes.
you.
Love you
See
too.
y'all
Love
later.
y'all. Yes.